in Southall, and even though she's ill herself, she's so strong that she went out and did some great work to look after those people that were effectively impacted on COVID-19. And there's another debate, which is that now that we try to accommodate them, accommodate being the key word, trying to find premises for these people that are homeless, what are we going to do now? Are they going to go back on the street? So, this problem still exists. And finally, what kind of projects are you working on in the future? So, Min, tell us about how hard has it been for you being a researcher and a presenter for different channels, including the BBC, to actually get stories and get information from people during the lockdown?
Oh, it's been really difficult. I mean, just putting a post out there for people to say, this is what I'm looking for, and trying to make it as clear as possible. I find that in the community, as an example, I always end up getting some backlash or some really negative comments, as you were aware recently. It's been really hard because I always think before I put a request out, how is the best way to say it? Because I think I've got it in my head what I'm looking for, but how's the best way to say it to other people? And no matter how many times I go through it, I amend it so many times. I think, oh, this is the best way. If I keep it a bit vague, then hopefully people will have some interest. Because the more detail you give, the more people start commenting on it, and you just kind of think, is it necessary? I found it really hard with our community, especially if I can, if I can say that and talk about it. Not everyone, but I just feel they've always got, and I'm sure this is with every community, they've always got something to say, or they've always got something bad to say about the BBC. And I personally think it's not just the BBC, it's any media. Negative stories, controversial stories sell. That's just the media as it is. So we can't point our fingers at the BBC that they bring the Sikh community down, or we do that ourselves because we don't help support one another. So it's been really hard. I find it really hard. I'm passionate about Sikh stories, I'm passionate about communities and culture, but my community has to help me in order to get those stories. So I've had to post it in several groups. I've had to talk to many people. I have had lots of support, to be fair. For example, Ram Gariya Godra in Southall, the guy who does the social media for that was amazing. He did a poster for me. He posted it out. There's people like that in the community that I wish we would see and hear more from, that help you and support you rather than asking you 101 questions. And you did the same as well, with your comment. You were very fair and, trying to basically bring that mood down a little bit, and the level of like anger in the group around just that one post, which, if I can talk about it, was I was looking for families that don't go to their place of worship as much. So they might go once a week. They may not go. They may be busy with other stuff. It wasn't a controversial story. And if I can talk about it now, it's about health and faith. That's all it was. How did the two come together? Are you too busy to look after your health? Are you too busy to go to your place of worship? It's actually a really nice story. And you saw the comments that we got. It just wasn't necessary. And that's when I thought, you know what, this is why I don't actually really want to do stories around our community. You get to a point where you get really frustrated because in order for us to be able to have a better place in the media and to not feel that the media are against us, you have to trust the Sikh journalists who care. And I feel I'm one of them who does care. I might do some controversial things like my story around my divorce, the interfaith piece. But again, that interfaith piece that I did had a Sikh voice. So I very much make sure that I bring a Sikh person in so that it's fair. But people don't see that and they don't support it. That's my frustration, that if you can understand where we were before to now, they might just think, actually, you know what, Min is making a bit of a difference, because I always do bring in a Sikh voice to keep it fair, and I have to be impartial myself. But at least I'm talking about stuff. I'm helping people to talk, giving women a voice, but I can't do it on my own. So it's been hard. It's been really, really hard, but it's fine.
I see what
I
you're
get
saying.
support from communities.
Now, I do see what you're saying, and I think one of the reasons why I'm not going to justify why people are probably reacting or react in a particular way is probably because there's an underlying suspicion, right, of trust. I mean, across the general media, not just the BBC,
Yeah.
because when you look at 1984, and you did write a piece recently for LinkedIn, which I read, which was very well written, and you used a very good researcher to find information, and it was fair and balanced, right? So as a researcher, you have to be fair and balanced. I can understand that if you ask a question, it can be misconstrued. How many times have you sent an email and you thought, even in business, you send an email and go, Angela, I didn't mean that, I meant this. But you can't explain everything in words, because when you express something in facial expressions or whatever, or, there's a bit of a kind of like, but I'd also like to do this, or there's a connection between this and this. There's only so many words that you can do. So I think you probably had a genuine interest in it. The other way I would look at it as a positive, if you were to look at the statement as bland as it is, right, and that's not negative, that's to say, if the statement is around, do you not go to Gurdwara that much? Well, some people have got Gurdwaras at home. They've got Guru Granth Sahib at home, or they pray in the morning, or they do Simran in the morning, and people have different ways in which they connect, right? If they can go to Gurdwara, great. Not everybody can get to Gurdwara. Some people actually go for a walk and do Rera Sahib at night time, or before they get up, and they get up in the morning early, they do Simran or whatever. Everyone has their own way. So I don't think it was a negative in terms of like, I don't think your sentiment was, do you do it because you're not very religious? It was like, during lockdown context, it's difficult to get to because Gurdwara is closed. In another way, how do you actually, partake your faith, right? It's just, there's so many different ways to connect with God, right? You can connect through meditation. So I think you probably had a positive sense, but I think nobody meant anything negative in those groups. I think it was just purely they were suspicious because in the
Yeah.
past, we haven't necessarily had a good, it's like the use of the word riot, right?
Yeah.
So why would you use the word riot in 1984 November when it's really pogrom, right? Pogrom is the correct term when one community battles against another community, right? When that other community is just sitting there. So, people have to, in the media, find good people to be able to tell the story clearly, fairly, right? And with proper references and proper cross-referencing about the fair point. My point on the note was purely that when I do look at documentaries, sometimes they miss out on the great contribution of the Sikhs, and I think that's really terrible, But I think it's really good that you've got to a position where you can influence and you can bring good people in.
Yeah, and that is exactly it. Look, I understand where you're coming from, right? Totally. But that's where I'm trying to make that change. But sometimes when you're trying to make that change and you don't get the support, you kind of think, well, I don't really blame the BBC. Let them crack on with what they're doing, because I think that's the frustration I've got. For 2 years, I've been doing the stories that I have, and I understand, my story around divorce might have upset people, and probably the interfaith piece, probably the only two pieces which were in the early days, that were done. And again, the interfaith piece, I was reporting on that, so I wasn't taking anybody's side. We were just simply getting a view. But again, I had Min Kaur as part of the Sikh voice. So, but if you look at, like you said, the 1984 piece that I did, I made a point of doing that to show that I do care. I want it to be a piece that shows emotion, so that will then go out to other people. So, from my perspective, I think I'm really trying really hard, and I don't always get that support. And I think that's what people don't see. People don't realise that it must be really hard for Min, because they probably think I get loads of support from the community. That 1984 piece got done because of someone who was so helpful, who is an Amritdhari Sikh, who knows about 1984. And the first thing when he said to me, I wanted to do the piece, was, how can I help you? And that's what I think we need to see in the community, that it doesn't matter the way that people look or what they do. Guru Nanak Dev Ji was all about love and being content and being kind. This person didn't say to me, well, you're not an Amritdhari, why do you want to write about 1984? You don't have the history. He thought, you know what, let's help Min and help her to learn. And actually, because of what he did, it made me want to learn more. I now want to go back to him as my Sikh voice, because he was amazing. He didn't judge me. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that I just wish, and I wish we could do it, maybe the change starts from us. I wish as a community we could help one another rather than working against each other and thinking, well, you can't do that, so I'm not going to help you. You're looking for this story.
I think it must have definitely have misconstrued. I know you from the past, and I know that you wouldn't have meant anything negative, but I think
Yeah.
Because of the way it comes across, right? People will put their guard up, and they put their guard up because of the mistrust generally of general mainstream media. I have got a little saying that says, if we don't tell our stories, right, somebody else will tell it for us, right? And that's normally what happens. People will rewrite textbooks, or they'll rewrite stuff, or they'll create media which is negative or is subtle. There's a lot of talk about, this racism issue. I've actually recently been talking to somebody else actually about the fact that I grew up in the 80s, 70s, so I've had it firsthand, and I think it still continues to happen, but in a more subtle way. And the subtle issue is associated with the fact that it's not done in your face. Somebody might be passed over for promotion, or somebody says something, or someone says something to somebody else, and you hear about it, right? And it's blatant racism. And this is where we have that mistrust, because people are working against you rather than actually working
Yes.
together. So we need a greater bunch of people to support each other, right?
Yeah.
But we just don't get the information coming across because it's just distorted, right? To suit either another political agenda, to cite a case, the Hindutva movement, which wants to, kind of completely, rewrite Sikh history, and you think that's not a good thing. Let's move on to positive things, right?
Yeah.
So another really good thing you did. Oh, you're doing positive stuff. The good thing that you did recently, and I read this article and I saw the posts on uh, Facebook. Now, a couple of people that we know as well mutually who are doing some great work in the community, who are heroes that don't get highlighted so much. It's a brilliant idea. The brilliant idea was, why not? Well, I won't spoil your thunder. Why not bake them something, right?
That was it. So the idea was, my mum has been learning recipes around eggless cakes, and she's always said, "Oh, I'm not really." She always tries different things. She'll go on YouTube, get these recipes, and she had made some cakes which were really nice, and they didn't have lots of sugar. They tasted really really nice. So I said to my mum, "Well, because of my dad, he was raising funds for the NHS. We had this very special number, which we know is very special for Sikhs, 13." And so my dad had, I don't think he had reached that, but the aim was 13,000. So I said to my mum, on June the 1st up until June the 13th, let's bake cakes for 13 heroes and we'll go out and give them to 13 people. That was the idea, 13 people. I think by day 3, we had had such a huge response from people. I couldn't believe how the videos had been received, and people just felt so touched and humbled. And the comments were really nice because the idea was, let's go out to the unsung heroes, the people that tend to be forgotten about, and the hidden heroes that are doing great work, but nobody really acknowledges them. Not that they're doing it for that reason, but that even more so to go and just surprise them with a home baked cake that's eggless and is henna decorated by myself, because I'm not doing any henna. So one of the people was Margarita, who we both know, and obviously hasn't been well and has a health issue, um, but is amazing and has been doing her selfless service for for so long. So she's been doing that for years, even throughout the time of her illness. So she was one person who, and I know she doesn't want it for that reason, but she's always doing loads of great work, helping others, always putting others before herself. And to me, I just thought I see so many Sikh values in her. She's just an amazing, lovely, down to earth person. So she was one of the people that we went to visit at the church in Southall, which is where the homeless come, and she'll give them some trainers or some clothes or some food. So we surprised her, and she was shocked. She couldn't believe it that we had baked her a cake. I think we'd even put in there like COVID heroes or something, like thank you, COVID heroes. And, that was it really. That was one of the people. But there were so many others like her who were doing great work in this time, and we just wanted to recognize them and surprise them, just to say thank you, because I think it's so important just to say thank you to someone and know that, what, we're watching what you're doing and it's fantastic and you're inspiring us.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting is that we were talking earlier on that although people have risen and actually, to the actual challenge ahead, and they've done
Yes.
something, it's
Yeah.
important to think that as the lockdown eases, you know, these people continue with their work. It's not that they did it just because of COVID lockdown. They did it because they had to think of a solution, right? And now that, say, for example, in her case, the homeless shelters. So that people couldn't be on the streets. There was a high case of infection. There is to a certain extent as well. But she will continue to do that work, won't she?
Yeah. She's a soldier. That was it. That she was in a high risk role. She herself hasn't been. She's got a weak immune system, and she still carried on. She's one thing she said to me that I'll never forget. She said, "I can't just sit at home. I need to always be doing
Mm.
something and helping others. That is in her blood." And so she was just one person that I thought, oh, I've definitely got to go and see her and say thank you to her. And she was so taken back by it and so thankful, and she never does her seva to be recognized. I think that in itself is an inspiration. She doesn't post things up, she doesn't have to kind of shout about it. So I just thought these are the unsung heroes, the hidden heroes, the people who deserve that. So we wanted to just do something really special. So my mum and I as a team went off, and the post offices were another, we went to 10 or 12 post offices, all different branches, again said to them thank you, as they continued throughout the pandemic, and they had massive queues outside, rude customers. I don't know what they had to put up with, but it was hard work. So we wanted to go and thank those people that have continued to help serve us and help us so that we could give back to them.
Absolutely, really, really good. And I think in their own right, they deserve programs of their own, right? Maybe
Yeah,
that's a subject you could pick on, like maybe take one case
I'd love
and explore. I mean, especially in a homeless situation, it's not one issue, it's compounded issues, whether it be, alcohol or drugs or some other issues or the fact there's an immigration. Um, and then sometimes it's all of those together. So,
true.
when we do come out of this, those problems still exist in society. It's not like they've gone away, and so, what motion can we put in place that's perpetual to solve the problem eventually? That's important to consider. So
Yeah.
what kind of projects are you looking at for the future? What kind of, well, we mentioned the one earlier on, but what kind of other projects are you looking at? I mean, and how do you go about this? Do you actually say, well, this is an interesting area, or there's something that's current affairs you think actually you'd be quite, I mean, this year you could, there's been no Vasaki
Mhm.
celebrations out and about, because obviously because of the lockdown. So that's an interesting way to look at how
Yeah.
people celebrate Vasaki at home.
Yeah, and that
Are
was
there other
something that I
projects
did.
that you're working on?
So yeah, I did do a piece on Vasaki, which is about virtual Vasaki. So again, that was really hard work to make sure that I got that marked, and I got that. I wrote an article in the HuffPost and also for the BBC, probably one of the most read articles on that day, because I knew that the Sikh community would not be able to go out, wouldn't be able to have a Nagar Kirtan, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we normally do. One of the most important celebrations for us with so much colour and so much meaning. So I highlighted that. I did 2 articles around that. I probably would like to do something later on in the year, depending on how things go. I mean, I would love to do something more around Vasaki. Are we going to do anything later on in the year? I don't know. So I guess how the ideas come about is just really me seeing what's going on current affairs wise, what is current, what is everyone talking about. And the other thing is really just from speaking to people. So sometimes, I'll have a conversation with someone and they will say something and I think, oh, you know what, that could make a story. And then I'll speak to somebody else and someone else. So this, the current story that I was working on around health and faith was because I read a news article, and it was just around how people that are faith are much more healthier. So it depends. It really, stories come from anywhere. It could be anywhere. It could be talking for somebody. It could be reading something in the paper. It could be in your local community. The most recent piece I did as well, which you might have seen, which was very important to me, and I kept on. I was going mad about this. I mean, it's still a problem. I think this happens everywhere. The rubbish that people are throwing everywhere. So I did a piece for the ITV that I produced, and it was It was around Harmondsworth and Osterley, all this rubbish that people were dumping even more in the pandemic, and it was driving me mad, and it was driving the local community mad. So that, again, I get lots of the local community contacting me about stories. I'm working on something now around air pollution, how much it's dropped. I live on the doorstep of Heathrow, so it has, I mean, naturally it would, but it's massively dropped since lockdown. So how that's improved, how has it affected people's health? So I'm doing a little local story around that. Also, I'm doing a piece around BAME doctors being affected by COVID and looking at the report. So lots of really like random things, but I think my passion is communities and culture. I definitely want, and unsung heroes. Those people that don't have a voice and have a story to tell that can inspire someone else. I'm really interested in hearing from them, because I think through COVID, if there's one thing we've learned, is there should be more love, more being kind, caring about one another. I really want to help people to have a voice, because I think it's so important, especially women from the BAME communities, come forward, because you definitely have got a story to share, and let's inspire and help other women to be strong, empowering women.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I think, I wish you best of luck in doing that. I think it's, like we said earlier on, right at the beginning, it's hard work. It's not hard work, not only actually trying to find, I guess, stories, but also the research. And if you find a good person who can actually advise you and be that person that brings in those elements and those different perspectives, because ultimately, as a reporter, do you think that your role is to facilitate? Obviously, sometimes reporters get ticked off when they side too much on an opinion. How hard is it for you to be that impartial one that brings it forward? And I say
Oh,
that because obviously you're asking the questions, and someone, well, you should have asked that question, or actually, does that mean that you ask that question because that's what you believe in? So it's hard, isn't it?
it's very hard. The whole being impartial thing. I think in the beginning I wasn't. I remember when I was pitching my ideas and I was saying, yeah, so or something like about me and being a Sikh. And I remember the feedback that I got from one of the editors was, you need to completely take out the me and Sikh because it's too close. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, if I want to pitch ideas around the Sikh community, I will have to be going down that middle of the road and saying, this is what's happening in the Sikh community, and these are the issues they're having, or this is something. And it's hard. It is hard, especially when I'm talking to people and I think, oh, I'd love to. I mean, I would always ask the question. If there's something that I know should be asked, I'd rather ask it because then it's in the piece. And if the editor feels they want to keep it in, they can. I think the hardest thing is when a piece is edited, I don't have control over that. And I never know what they keep and what they don't keep. That is hard because I'm not an editor. And with any piece, and this is again, not just the BBC, with anyone, the only bit they're going to keep in is the bit that leaves the other people thinking, really kind of being enriched. So they're not going to do all the really lovely stories, kind, nice ones. My dad's one made it, which was amazing because it was a really positive, motivational story.
So do you think they're interested in sensationalism rather than actually? But what I would say is, and this goes back to the article that you wrote, recently about 84. I mean, ultimately, the truth will come through. Now, whether you ask the question 3 or 4 times to 3 or 4 people, and they're all saying the same thing, if the underlying message at the end of the day is that this is what happened, and this is 15 different, testimonials or, witness stories, then there's no denying the truth, right? So as a reporter, you can be as impartial as you want, ask the questions differently, but if the same truth comes out, then I think you've done your job, right?
100%. That's it. And that's how I see it now. I just think, it's what you've said, that you can ask the question as many times as you want. At the end of the day, the truth does come out, which is why with 1984 it worked, because I knew that wasn't going to get commissioned by anyone else. I knew it wasn't going to, because it wasn't how can I say, it wasn't very much sided with the other side. This one I thought would get commissioned by the Religion Media Centre because they want people to write stories around their faith. And I knew that this would get commissioned and it would get out there, and it did, and it got the message across because those 3 case studies that I used in there had a lot of emotion. And if I look at the comments, it has made people really reflect on 1984. I've had so many people say to me, Min, thank you so much for shedding a light because of those stories, because they were real stories. And exactly what you said about the truth. You can never hide from the truth. Those case studies were real. They shared their experience. And I think that's what we should do more around 1984 is people's experiences and stories, because emotion is what that will stay with people, and that will stay with people for life, and they will care more because they'll understand, oh, is that what the Sikhs went through? That's actually really bad.
And that's interesting, actually, because we got to go, unfortunately, in the next few seconds. But I was
Oh,
going to say, it's been great chatting with you, and really good to get you on the show. But just on this 1984 piece, I would also say there's other media as well, like poetry, right? Or there's different ways to communicate those
yeah,
messages, and then bringing those elements together. Where you and Jewish community are really good at that. They've got movies, they've got literature that's been written, they've got mainstream stuff. Like for example, the guy who wrote the girl actually who wrote um, the tattooist of Auschwitz, right? How
yeah,
terrible was that? That
exactly.
the Germans got a Jew to mark the numbers on the Jews that were coming into the concentration camps. I mean, that's touching. So emotion, you're right, is the key. So I was
Yeah,
going to say, thank you so much for joining. It's so great to
thank
talk to
you.
you. And I wish you best of luck in all your future projects.
Oh,
And maybe we can do some stuff together. You never know. We'll see.
definitely.
And wish you all the best, and keep up that running so that you can, go with your mum and dad, and keep yourself fit and keep them fit as well.
Oh, thank you
We'll
so
see you
much. God
soon.
bless you.
Okay, good
Thank you.
luck, and I'll wish you all the best. And I'll look forward to seeing you again. Right? You'll come
Oh,
back on the show.
yeah, thank you. Keep up
Waheguru
the great work.
Ji.
Vaheguru Ji
Thank you so
Khalsa,
much.
Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.